Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the keynote stage Distinguished Vice President, Gartner Research and Advisory, and Conference Co-Chair, David Cappuccio.
Good morning. You know, the majority of you in this audience, the infrastructures you have today, they're not going to be adequate to support the business going forward. Now, that's bad news. But here's worse news. From the business perspective, if you can't support them, it's going to be your fault. Your fault. Unless you're willing to adapt, unless you're willing to adopt new strategies, unless you're willing to rethink your organization and how you do things while still keeping the lights on. Over the past year, we've talked to hundreds of companies, many of you in the audience, about where their infrastructure is going. And we're hearing a consistent message. Number one, you want to be out of the data center business. We're done with that. It's not our core business. Number two, demands of the business are escalating, sometimes dramatically, and we need to keep up. Number three, demands on the infrastructure are escalating dramatically, and we need to keep up there. IT itself must be faster, leaner, and smarter. Oh, in case you forget, we need to do this with smaller budgets. Some things never change. But the underlying theme from all these conversations has been pretty consistent around the world, and that is that the future of infrastructure is everywhere. Everywhere. That's right, everywhere. Whether we as individuals like it or not, it's out of our hands. The business is taking control in many cases. In some cases, simply not here is the answer to where is everything being placed. Wow, how do we deal with that? The future has radically changed, but this week, we're going to share with you some ideas of how to get there safely. Rest assured, there is a light at the end of this tunnel. And for you cynics out here, it's not a train coming at you. So what I've done is invited 4 colleagues to join us today to help outline a vision of how to begin this journey. Let's call it the art of the possible. Bob Gill will come up and talk about how agility drives diversity. We're all sitting in worlds where we need to create more and more agile environments. How do we go about that? What are the best techniques? Bob's going to talk about that. Dennis Smith will come up and talk about applications, how applications enable change. And I know this is mostly an Ayano audience, but it turns out that our role in life is to enable the ability of those applications to be successful. Bittman was going to come up and talk about what we call boundaries are shifting. The boundaries of what we see as an infrastructure are starting to change. Things like edge, IoT, lots of new futures out there, which would be, in some cases, out of our control, but still our responsibility. And last but not least, Kris will come up and talk about people and how they're the cornerstone of what we're going to do moving forward, and how unless we get these people changed and unless we shift directions, we won't be able to succeed. So with that, I want you to help me welcome onto the stage my colleague Bob Gill to start us on this journey.
Thank you. Good morning. I know we're in Las Vegas and it's a Monday morning and some of you are in different time zones. But I want to start by asking you 2 key questions. How many of you, show of hands, have agility as a top 3 imperative for 2019? A lot of hands. How many of you at the same time also feel overwhelmed by the flood of technology that's just coming over the transom? Things pop up every day, new technologies, new approaches. You wake up one day and you're asked to manage a public cloud implementation that you didn't even know was brought on board. Once again, a lot of the hands. And therein lies the conundrum, the problem that we're faced with, is we're being asked to support agility, But agility thrives in diversity. And by diversity, what I mean is lots of options, different ways to solve the problem, different tool sets, different frameworks, different programming models. But for infrastructure and operations, this kind of diversity is the monster under the bed. Because what happens is as diversity rises, our control diminishes. Our visibility into the end-to-end solution diminishes. Our ability to have some kind of assuredness that everything is right in the world goes down. So what we're being asked to do is to sort of attack these two countervailing opinions, these two countervailing points. The ideal would be if we could regain control over some of the things that have happened over the last several years. We'll talk about a short-term option. And then longer term, much like a surfer getting ahead of a wave, try and get ahead of where the business units want us to be from an agility perspective, not just the business units, but the application developers, who, as you'll hear today, in many cases, are the customers of infrastructure and operations. So it used to be that you controlled everything. You had, if I go date myself and I go back 40 years or 50 years, we talk about a glass house where everything was completely contained. But even more recently, IT had absolute control over IT assets, except for people running off and doing PC LANs and client server and things like that. But in many ways, it reminds me of the mid-1970s when I worked at a General Motors plant in New Jersey assembling Cadillacs. And the first day I showed up, the one thing I was struck by was there's barbed wire fence, like a prison camp. And there's train tracks in and train tracks out. Just one way in, one way out. And intense security at every entrance. And so basically what happened is within that plant had been pre-planned by years. There was the heartbeat of the assembly line. Nothing was flexible. Everything happened for a reason at a given time. Was it efficient? You bet. Was it agile? Absolutely not. Because if we wanted to change over to a new product line, a new model car, you had to shut the whole plant down and retool and start all over again. In many ways, that's the corner that we've painted ourselves in with IT over the last 40 years. So what did the business units do as they're facing their own agility challenges? They went around us. They deployed externally sourced servicings, things like public cloud, things like software as a service, things like hosting models, because what they needed was solutions to problems they had, and we weren't necessarily stepping up to the plate. So what we're showing here is that your world has changed dramatically, and now we find ourselves in this mesh that we've got to somehow impose order on and manage. So in many ways, this seems like a tough situation. Maybe we could throw up our hands and say stop, but we can't. We can't put the genie back in the bottle because the business units are going to be looking for the agility they need to survive and to flourish going forward, whether we like it or not. But the thing is, the business units still need our steady hand of governance, of security, of application reuse, the kind of thing you'll never get from a young person with a credit card sitting in a programming cubicle who's starting up an entirely new project because it seems like something cool to do. So our factory model is out of date, and that's the genesis of the phrase you hear, the data center is dead. There's still data centers, but the idea that data center as that core factory that controls everything is out of date. So short term, what do we want to do? We want to impose order on chaos. And then longer term, as I said, we want to come up with a catalog of services, pre-vetted architectures and options that allow us to put some guardrails on things, but at the same time provide the agility the business is looking for. So short term, we want to triage. We want to stabilize the patient. So how would we possibly impose order on the kind of chaos you see here? Well, thankfully, there's a number of options that have occurred or have arisen over the last several years, many of them as-a-service overlays, things like DNS as a service, security as a service, telemetry-based routing as a service. And a lot of these allow us to carve off our own individual pieces of this mesh and control them, maybe not to the degree we did years ago, but in a pretty robust fashion. So we want to choose logical subsections and really hammer on those, really own and control those. We want to use these overlays to impose order on chaos, and we'll be talking about a lot of these throughout the week. Longer term, though, what we want to do is rather than focusing on a project and doing the project and then just considering it done, is we want to move to a product orientation where we're delivering products to the enterprise, products to the business unit. And some of you have seen me use this model in the past. It's a value discipline model that people use in graduate school for business all the time. But this is the way the business looks at problems. This is the way that business tries to solve their own agility issues. If you walk into a boardroom and say, hey, by the way, do you guys want to go with SDN or MPLS? They have no idea what you're talking about, and frankly, they shouldn't, and they shouldn't care. What they're worried about is these kinds of things to differentiate the business. If you're Walmart, you worry about operational excellence and lowest costs. If you're the Weather Channel, what you worried about several years ago, or the weather company, is coming up with another use than just publishing of all that weather data and using that digital asset to sell to airlines to figure out how much fuel to put on a jet. And then more recently, I'm working with a top 5 bank on customer intimacy, basically the branch of the future. So what we want to do is come up with these pre-vetted patterns of solutions, reach in our digital toolbox of possibility, and be able to pull out solutions to these business problems that you see on the left. So as to provide a well-architected set of solutions and services. And Dennis and Tom will talk quite a bit more about these. The other theme, besides short-term and long-term solutions, is that infrastructure is everywhere. This is a little bit more solvable of a problem. I often talk to clients that say, you know, we've been a US-based company. I've been asked to spin up resources in Hong Kong, Singapore, Sydney, and in Frankfurt. And one of the things that we can do is once we understand that we're moving outside of our own factory with the barbed wire around it, really the difference between across the country and across the world isn't that much except for regulations and latency and things like that. But from a technology perspective, what we're talking about is longer circuits. And I realize that's an oversimplification. But when we wrote something called the Edge Manifesto in 2014, what we were really talking about was topology, not technology. And what I'm arguing here is the intelligent use of data center assets may be in a co-location center, but the idea of establishing nodes in various locations where we can on-ramp and off-ramp to the cloud and to offer local services and keep things, for example, within certain government jurisdictions. There's ways to solve this infrastructure is everywhere global reach problem just by looking at the whole notion of topology, where to place the assets, and intelligently where to pop on and pop off things like the public cloud. We want to provide guardrails to avoid unnecessary complexity and the chances of things going wrong. But the big question becomes, who's going to do all this? Are we going to get a systems integrator? Are we throwing everything over to our network carrier? Who is going to achieve the things that I talked about, the short term, the long term, and the global reach? And the answer is, you are, the people in this room. Because the need for agility is only going to increase. The business requires agility. The application developers are feeding that solution. The application developers then need solutions from us, the infrastructure, whether it's public cloud or something provided internally, different programming frameworks. We've got to enable them. So the 2 key tasks I said is we want to manage the sprawl and fix the over diversity, and then become product managers or integrators. It's that whole notion of having that toolbox, of being able to say, you know, to the application developers and the business, you're looking to do X, Y, Z. You know, we just went to Amazon reInvent, and there's a great solution for supplying customer intimacy in a branch banking environment, and here's a predefined pattern on how to get started doing that. Because when you think about it, infrastructure can save money. Infrastructure can be more efficient, it can be more robust, but infrastructure does not make money. The applications make money. The applications actually solve the problems that the business unit is in that business unit diagram I talked about. And our role is to support the application developers and provide them with that agility. So with that as an intro, what I'd like to do is bring up my colleague, Dennis Smith, who'll talk about what a wonderful time it is to be an application developer and how Ayano can work very closely with app dev for this agility of the future. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Bob, and good morning, everyone. I want to start by pondering the application development ecosystem, thinking specifically about all of the innovation and all of the enhancements that have occurred through the years leading up until now. I think as you do that, you can make a very strong argument that there's no better time than now to be an application developer, in that not only do you have a seat at the table as your enterprises are looking at innovating and into progressing their digital strategies, but you have access to a store full of goodies and or enablers that will make your job a heck of a lot easier. So let's look at what some of these goodies are. Up front is ready access to infrastructure and platform services through all of the wonderful offerings that the public cloud providers offer. Similarly, DevOps principles and practices are very much changing the game for how innovative organizations are now delivering code. Many of those DevOps teams are using application frameworks that not only help junior developers, but also help senior developers, and they help them by eliminating a lot of the heavy lifting that's involved in becoming productive during the application development process. There's been a radical change over the past few years in how applications are architected, where if you look at in the past, many organizations would build monolithic applications. They would have numerous internal teams that would all pull their changes for that major weekly change. And hopefully when they did it, maybe a Saturday night, Sunday morning, everything would go well. If it didn't, then they're back at the drawing board the following week. So what's happening is that many organizations are breaking up those monoliths. They're breaking them up into manageable components. They're farming them out to different groups. These groups are often using DevOps principles and practices. Many of them are operating at their own respective speeds. Some of them, surprisingly, are doing multiple changes a day. So totally changing that dynamic in really having agility and speed and really producing quality code rapidly. A lot's happening on the technology front, where containers solve a long-standing challenge that application developers have had. That is, if I code on my desktop, I have no guarantee that what I'm coding will work in that development environment or in that production environment. So containers come up with the idea of, hey, let's use a standard format and a standard runtime so that if all of those environments support it, you can be pretty guaranteed that your application will run in those environments. Serverless technologies that many of you are probably hearing about, they take infrastructure abstraction to a whole nother level, in that application developers now only need to concentrate on business logic. They need not worry about any of the infrastructure components. So all of the goodies that we talked about are all centered around APIs, where APIs now allow different groups to collaborate in building unified systems, all made up of a tapestry of different software components. So as you digest these goodies, you can see it's a wonderful time to be an application developer. However, as I look out in the audience and sense what you're thinking, you're probably saying, hey, Smith, what about me? I'm not an application developer, right? I work in the infrastructure and operations area. And yes, while it is in many ways the best of times for an application developer, in theory, it could be the worst of times for infrastructure and operation. However, we strongly believe that there's a huge opportunity here for you to collaborate with your users, specifically the application developers, in providing services and product that only you can provide and that are vitally, vitally needed. And we have a ton of content here this week that will lead you on that path. So let's look at what some of these services are. Up front is automation. Automation is the secret sauce of the modern infrastructure, in that if you do it right, it will have a tremendous downstream effect on a lot of the activity that occurs in your environment. So your mantra here has to be, any repetitive manual task in your environment, you need to automate, right? Key, you need to automate it. Governance, key area. Bob touched upon this in terms of adding some order to the chaos. But it is also a very nuanced area in that you need to ensure that there is environmental hygiene. However, you cannot take away from the agility and the speed that your users want. We talked about APIs earlier. Those APIs need a solid infrastructure, an infrastructure that has redundancy, scale, security. And again, who's better to work in providing that than you? Business continuity is an interesting area. in that every time one of the major cloud providers has an outage, we hear from our customers that they were disappointed, they were surprised, they did not plan for it. And here, using a lot of the knowledge and experience you have in doing disaster recovery testing and planning, your quarterly tests, your monthly tests with on-premise applications, some of those same competencies fit as you're looking at applications that may not be running within your environment. We live in a self-serve world where users want services in a manner that they want it, whenever they want it. That means here that you're going to need to provide an environment that handles different personas. In some cases, you may want to have a very restrictive service catalog type of an orientation. In others, you may want to have broad guardrails for it. But again, note that you need to plan for handling different personas. And the final key area is infrastructure lifecycle management. Similarly to business continuity, we hear a lot from our customers around this, particularly those that have dissatisfaction with their public cloud deployments. And unfortunately, many of them have treated their public cloud deployment as though it is residential cable TV service, where they've used it and they pay a bill every month. And not surprisingly, they're paying more than what they planned. So there's an opportunity here for you to engage with your users in providing cost management and workload optimization there with it. So all of those horizontal services, huge opportunity for you to engage. And we have a ton of content here this week around it. You must do it for all of the applications in your environment. That includes what we call modular apps, which would be your legacy apps or your cloud native. As we stated earlier, increasingly these are becoming mini and microservices. You must do it for intelligent apps. These are apps that are starting to bake in machine learning and AI into the mix. They have a little different set of infrastructure requirements than the modular apps. Perhaps a different compute storage profile that you need to be aware of. And you will have connected apps. And Tom Bittman will, after me, cover that area in detail. But key here is understanding that it involves a little different profile. And yes, there is an urgency here. We believe that you're going to need to spend the next 18 months in engaging and planting seeds here around moving towards a service and a product orientation. You don't want to become a part of these companies or organizations that are not satisfying what their users want. Because frankly, if you do, they will go elsewhere. So what do? Up front, you need to come to the realization that you're moving from an environment where you engineer and operate everything to an environment where you may not engineer and operate anything. But there's still a huge opportunity for you to provide those horizontal services. We have a ton of content here this week around it. And let me share a personal story with you. I was a practitioner for many, many years, and I came to this conference for many, many years. I would often show up on Sundays with the idea that when I leave on Friday, I want to have 3 areas, 3 topics that I then take back to my teams so that they can work on over the upcoming year. I recommend that here. But I recommend to you that at least one of those areas be application development related, in that you need to understand the technologies, the challenges, right, the pain points, the language that application developers are using. And as you do that, go back to your organizations, engage, mingle, figure out what's happening there, gather what their requirements are. And as you bring them back, craft solutions, craft answers to those problems. But don't focus in just on the technology. It's a combination. Technology, people, and process. You need all 3 pillars here. And then deliver. And as you deliver, don't view it as being a point in time. In that it will need to be enhanced. It will need to evolve as time goes on. And overriding all of that is that your environment will involve activity on-prem, activity in a hosted environment, activity in a public cloud, and increasingly activity at the edge. And Tom Bittman will now take you through a journey of the exciting things that are happening at the edge.
Well, good morning. So Bob showed you how infrastructure was going to become more diverse. And Dennis took you to the candy store, at least the candy store for application developers, and showed you what you needed to do about that. Now it's my turn, and I'm going to push you all the way to the edge. Your boundaries are shifting. The boundaries of infrastructure are shifting. The infrastructure is not simply moving from your data center to the cloud. That would be far too simple. What's happening here is your business requirements are expanding. Your application portfolios are growing, and your infrastructure is also expanding. We believe that your infrastructure will be everywhere. It'll be in your data center, it'll be in the cloud, and it will stretch all the way to the edge. And let me show you why. Digital business, IoT, and immersive technologies, immersive experiences are creating entirely new business requirements for us. It's changing things. It's speeding everything up. How people interact, how things interact, how businesses operate. And everything has data. The data center that we're all used to won't be the center of data anymore. Cloud computing is important. Cloud computing has given us agility at the back end. It's given us scale. It's given us capability. But it's all at the back end, and that's simply not enough. Edge computing complements cloud computing. Edge computing is giving us that agility and that real-timeness and that responsiveness at the front end. So let's talk about how these trends are shaping the future of your infrastructure. Digital business. Digital business is completely disruptive to the business, to IT, and to your infrastructure. There are really three big ideas with digital business. And the first is we're trying to blur the lines between physical and digital. Now, where is physical and digital? Where do they meet? They mostly meet at the edge. That's where we see a lot of these opportunities beginning to occur. And these will create new business designs, new competitive opportunities that we need to help our enterprises create. We also see new interactions that are being created between people and businesses and things in this blurring. What are these interactions? It could be between a shopper and a store shelf, or between a car and a stoplight, or between you and your home. These are all new interactions that we want to deal with. And then I think perhaps the most important thing here that we need to deal with when we talk about speed and real time, it's new business moments. What do I mean by that? Well, I mean more and more smaller transient windows of opportunity where these interactions are taking place, where these things are passing each other very quickly, where an event takes place, and we want to take advantage of that. There will be tremendous pressure on you to support that and to help your enterprise be more responsive, more reactive, more engaged in real time. So digital business is really reinforced and driven by a couple of technologies, in particular IoT, the Internet of Things, and immersive experiences and immersive technologies. So let's talk about those. Now, first, IoT. Things are getting noisy and needy. What do I mean by that? Things are producing a tremendous amount of data, and that's growing rapidly. We're not just lighting up things out there at the edge. They're producing data, and they're also needy. They need to be told what to do. Something happens, they need to be told what to do very, very quickly. So there's a complete paradigm shift taking place here in data management as this data is growing at the edge. Essentially, what's happening is your data management is going to flip upside down. And this is a fundamental shift. We're used to the data coming from the core, coming from the center, being in the data center. We believe in the next 4 years, more than half of your enterprise-generated data is going to be created and processed outside of the data center and outside of the cloud. It's going to be at the edge and everywhere in between. As I mentioned, the data center will no longer be the center of data. This is going to happen. Now, data has gravity, and that pulls compute to it. Why? Because bandwidth is improving, yeah, 5G, 6G, it's improving, but the equation of bandwidth improvement over the years has never kept up with improvements in compute. That equation is inevitable. We bring compute closer to the data. Also, the type of data that's being produced at the edge is different. It tends to have a lower value. It tends to be lots of information. These things are noisy, but that doesn't mean that every bit of data that they have is valuable. So we want to filter that, and we want to process that in place. The second thing is that data at the edge is different. On average, the half-life of a bit at the edge is going to be much, much shorter. These are events that are happening now, and they need to be reacted to now. So we have to defeat the speed of light. We have a problem there with the speed of light, and that will pull compute closer to that data also. And finally, when you have a lot of data being produced, and we will have a lot of data being produced, there's also the opportunity and actually the requirement that we do more with that data. Machine learning is not only going to be at the core and in the data center and in the cloud. Machine learning is going to come all the way down to the edge. So we're going to have more data, and it's going to be closer to the things, and it's going to be closer to people and closer to you. The other trend here that helps reinforce digital business is immersive experiences and immersive technology. People weren't born to use a keyboard or a mouse or a browser or a search engine. These aren't natural. These are not intuitive. We are on an inevitable path to eliminate these artificial barriers and delays between people and digital. Just to give one example, we believe in the next 3 years, more than 25% of enterprises will be introducing mixed reality solutions. And that's from just 1% last year, so this is a huge growth. But I don't want this to be seen as a technology thing, because immersive is very different, and I hope this comes across. This isn't just a normal technology shift with a normal technology adoption curve. What's really happening here is these immersive technologies are lighting a fire of generational and cultural change. This is similar to what happened with the internet. People are going to expect faster. They're going to expect responsive. They're going to expect engagement. They're going to expect real time. They're going to expect context. So there's a very, very real consumerization of IT effect here that will drive more and more requirements on the enterprise. So, where is this starting? Well, it's starting often in the home. It's starting in your home. It's starting in video games. It's starting in home automation and entertainment. But we believe that those investments, and there are large investments there, will extend and grow into enterprise requirements. A couple of examples. If you can verbally control your home today, don't you want to also walk into the workplace and control your workplace, turn on the lights and so forth? You're going to want to bring that to the workplace. If you're a student and you're working on a collaborative project with other students, and you're building something in virtual reality together, aren't you going to want to bring that technology to your work team as you graduate, as you get a job? Of course you are. If you're using augmented reality on your smartphone as a novelty now and you see what it can do, aren't you going to want to use that to interact with stores, with store shelves, with machinery? Of course you're going to want to do that. If you can put a Pokemon on your desktop using mixed reality, which is really fun, isn't it a cool idea if you could also take your displays that are sitting there on your desktop and holding you down and make them virtual and carry them with you and share them with others? Of course you are. So the important point here is that digital business is absolutely about business and it's about technologies, but it's very, very, very much about people. Which people? It's you, and it's your customers, and it's your employees. And as one example, I've actually had a couple of management software companies talk to me about bringing, and I'm not an immersive expert, but I know a lot about infrastructure. I've had a couple of these companies come to me and say, we'd like to create a mixed reality or virtual reality console for our infrastructure administration customers. Wow, it's coming. So what does this have to do with edge computing? In order to blur these boundaries between digital and physical, in order to go after these business moments, in order to take advantage of all these things that are lighting up and being connected, in order to enable these immersive experiences in different forms, we've got 4 laws standing in our way, and we have to find a way around them. The first is a law of physics, the speed of light. The speed of light. So what's the problem here? The problem is that sometimes the compute is too far away. We have to fight that latency by bringing the compute closer. It's inevitable. If latency is an issue, I can't beat the speed of light other than to get the compute closer. By the way, 5G, 20G, these don't solve this problem. Latency, the speed of light remains. The second problem is a law of economics. It's bandwidth. As I mentioned, that equation between bandwidth cost and compute cost inevitably will push compute closer to the data and closer to the edge. The third is the law of the land. I mean, think about this data. Think about the data about your person, about your workplace, about your store, about your equipment. This data is going to be very confidential. It's going to be very intimate, and there will be more and more regulatory controls that are diverse worldwide on how to deal with that. So privacy and security and regulatory pressures alone will push some of this workload to the edge. And the fourth law we've got to work around is autonomy. Now what do I mean by that? Well, business can't stop if the connection to the core or the data center stops. We've got to keep going. Or the oil rig can't stop if its connection goes down. We need to keep running. So we're going to leverage the data center or the cloud when we can. But when we can't, we're going to need to continue to run. Let me ask a question. How many, and I think I can see through the lights here, how many of you have Alexa or Google Assistant or smart lights or smart switches or smart thermostats in the home? Quite a few of you, and next year will probably be double. Isn't it fun, by the way? Yeah, it's kind of fun. What's not fun is when your internet connection goes down, and I'm sitting comfortably in my chair, and I say, hey, Google, turn on the lights, and Google says, I can't help you right now. You know, why is that? Now, that's a first world problem, right? But so I get that, but our expectations continue to shift over time. What if it's not my home and my lazy legs? What if it's my store? Or what if it's my assembly line? Or what if it's my car? What if it's the stoplight? What if it's a military unit? Or what if it's a nuclear power plant? We've been talking to all these folks. Basically, in a connected world can't stop when the connection goes down. And autonomy will be one of those factors that pulls us into edge computing and makes that a part of our infrastructure. So this is what edge is all about. This is what edge computing is all about. So your infrastructure will be everywhere, including the edge. But edge has depth. Now, what do I mean by that? You know, edge doesn't necessarily have to be in the thing or in the assembly line. It doesn't have to be in the room. It could be in the building, or it could be on the campus, or it could be in the metro area, or somewhere nearby. Where edge computing is located, it depends on latency, it depends on your bandwidth requirements, it depends on privacy, it depends on autonomy. All those things will drive the topology of edge computing. But also, you won't necessarily build, own, manage your own edge. You might leverage somebody else's edge. Somebody might already be there. Similar to cloud computing, somebody might already be there, and you'll want to provision your things into that. You want to rent it, you want to borrow it. So edge is going to be, there are going to be many different edges here. And really, one thing I'd like to get across, this isn't about this pendulum swing from centralized to decentralized and back again. I mean, certainly that pendulum swings, but this is a lot more about a rich topology. We believe that edge computing is actually taking the idea of decentralized computing and centralized computing and making it full 3D. So your infrastructure is going to be everywhere. However, you're going to need to design this. You're going to need to manage this. You're going to need to build this, take advantage of this. You're going to need the people, the skills, and the organization to make this work, because technology by itself won't just happen. Without people, Without people, your infrastructure really is nowhere. So to discuss how people are really the cornerstone of making all of this richness happen, please welcome Kris Van Riper.
Are you feeling inspired? We've heard some great ideas and possibilities, and it's easy to get excited when you hear from Bob and Dennis and Tom about the potential of all of these new ways of working. We're rapidly moving toward a world of continuous change, where infrastructure is everywhere. And importantly, people are the cornerstone. Now, in this new world, old behaviors and leadership models are not going to work. You're going to need to have a new talent model for Ayano that involves skills, competencies, new mindsets, new career paths. And only when they're adopted will you be able to achieve the new results and new opportunities. So, let's talk about some of the new roles that my colleagues mentioned. We're seeing more and more companies try to recruit DevOps engineers, user experience designers, cloud architects, API product managers, chief analytics officers, and IoT data analysts. And they're looking to expand their competencies around customer centricity, product management, and information integration. And this is far from an exhaustive list. In fact, I'm sure if we came back here next year and put this slide up again, that we would have a whole bunch of new roles added to it. So let me ask the room for a show of hands. How many of you are looking to add some of these roles and capabilities and skills to your teams? Great. Okay, now keep your hands high if you feel very confident in your ability to fill the roles or acquire the skills. Yeah, that's what we found too. I hope that some of you saw this week in Forbes magazine, we've been able to highlight some of our data that shows that it's getting harder to recruit roles, especially in cloud. The salaries have gone up a lot in the last couple of years. The time to fill and the difficulty in recruiting have really increased. And so that's caused us to really put in a reality check. We at Gartner are predicting that 75% of Ayano leaders are not ready with the skills, behaviors, and mindsets that they're going to need to be successful across the next 2 to 3 years. And so if there's one thing that you take away from me today, it's that you go back to your offices and you put as much urgency into your talent strategy as you historically have in your technology strategy. We want you to leave this conference with confidence about where you have talent gaps and how you're going to fill them. Now, on this slide, you see the bad news, that 75% of your peers are not ready. But the good news is that 25% of them are figuring it out. And that's very exciting to us as researchers, because we can find those companies and interview them and understand what do the best companies do to gain great technology talent. We found that they reward and incent their employees differently to motivate them to want to learn new skills and take on new career paths. And through our interviews, we've really found 4 critical success factors that separate the best companies. First, they've shifted from a sole focus on technology certifications to also adding business-focused competencies. They've shifted from narrow career ladders to more dynamic career progression. They've changed from rewarding rigid, siloed technical specialties to instead continuous development of versatile skills. And they've really changed away from change-resistant risk aversion to instead change champion mindsets. So let's start with that first one, business-focused competencies. We were really interested in understanding what makes a difference. What are the competencies that accelerate digital dexterity, that make the most difference in achieving digital business outcomes? And we found 5. First, at the foundation is adaptability. And by adaptability, we mean openness to new ways of working, willingness to retrain, and to take on new roles. Next, we highlighted business acumen. And that's the important role, as Bob highlighted, the ability to understand the business goals of your project sponsors, to understand what they are trying to achieve with your solution, to be able to speak their language. Fusion collaboration. This is different than the collaboration of the past. This is not just collaborating with the people on your team or who work closely with you. This is the ability to go across boundaries, to work with your applications peers or your security peers or your business sponsors, to be able to iterate and incorporate feedback from them in a continuous way. Systems thinking. Here we're talking about being able to understand the inputs and the outcomes, the organizational awareness to understand how all of the different pieces of your solution fit together. And finally, stakeholder partnership. Critical in the ability to make that transition, that you're able to influence and demonstrate empathy with your stakeholders. And as Bob mentioned, to go from order takers to change champions. And so across these competencies, you see a very different picture of the Ayano workforce begin to emerge. And overall, we're seeing a new Ayano worker profile that really rewards skill versatility. We're seeing more companies focus on developing Ayano versatilists versus just technical specialists. Now, keep in mind, versatilists, we're not talking about generalists. These people have strong technical depth, and they also have strong business competency. They just have it in more areas, which is what makes them more valuable. And these folks have the ability to shape business partner demands and creatively develop Ayano solutions. And we were able to identify and interview one of your peers, Jim Gay, who runs infrastructure at Nationwide Insurance, who really taught us a lot about this. Jim feels passionately about bringing technology versatility to his team. And so as part of that, he creates a technology skills roadmap. Now, what do I mean by that? I assume many of you create technology roadmaps. And why do we do that? We do that when the future looks very different than the past. We do it so we can signal the change in advance, so that change is less disruptive to our teams. And Jim and his leadership team at Nationwide do this for skills. They highlight which skills are emerging, where if you're willing to retrain in this area, there'll be more opportunities for you. And they highlight the skills that are legacy, where they expect to see less and less demand in the future. And they signal that to their employees so that they can identify mentoring and retraining opportunities. We're also seeing that people believe so passionately in this versatilism that they are rethinking IT career paths. They're becoming more dynamic. And they're shifting from the traditional view of linear skill and career development toward more multi-skilling and career versatility. Now, the historical view is that your career in Ayano will look somewhat like a ladder, that you'll move up rung by rung, position by position, and your opportunities will mostly be limited to your organizational or functional silo. The problem with that ladder mentality is you could get to the top and then realize that the ladder is actually quite rickety. And particularly in this digital age, where technology obsolescence happens so quickly, it's actually quite risky to put all of your eggs in one technology basket. So instead, we see more people moving to creating what we see on the right-hand side as multi-skilling and career versatility, career diamonds. And here you can see that moving ahead in your career might actually mean that you take a lateral move, or you go diagonally, but you're taking on new skills and experiences and working in different parts of the organization. And here we learned a lot from your peer Dan McKean, who runs infrastructure at Intel. Dan and many of the executives at Intel have careers that look more like this, that they have switched from infrastructure to applications, to manufacturing, to business units, and along the way become much more aware of how the full organization comes together to create value through technology. Now, all of these changes are going to mean that people are moving around. And so talent mobility needs to become a design principle of the infrastructure function. And that's going to require a different leadership mindset. Now, many of us started in Erawan under technology leadership. We were great technology stewards. We focused on cost efficiency, governance, controls, operational metrics. And we were very reactive to change and disruption. But then the environment changed. And so we transitioned to service leadership. We focused on an increased area of emphasis on vision and culture. We became more proactive around managing change and disruption, not just reacting to it. But we see that era shifting again toward digital product leadership, as Bob mentioned before, a focus on products rather than projects. And product focus is going to mean that we are continuously involved in engaging and upgrading our technology in the way that we're bringing value to customers. We're also going to be focused on innovation, not just efficiency, and agility, not just stability. And we're going to be moving to an era where we drive change and disruption. Now, given all of these changes, it's really an amazing time to be a leader in infrastructure and operations. And we're very interested in understanding how these changes are affecting you. So there is a new opportunity for you to participate in a survey that is right outside of the ballroom at a booth on the right. All people who join us at the booth will get fabulous Gartner Tchotchkes and also a raffle ticket to win the ability to come back here to next year's event for free. But the survey is about 5 minutes, and it's really focused on understanding how these changes are affecting you and your career paths and your skills development. Now, let me wrap up. My colleagues and I have highlighted the fact that we're moving to an era where infrastructure is everywhere. And that's requiring a couple of changes. And we hope that you're here today because you came to help your function, your team, and your own career path position yourself for success in this new reality. David mentioned that we need to adopt, adapt, and rethink our approach. Bob highlighted that agility thrives on diversity. And we may feel that we have a messy, chaotic starting point, but we can use a digital toolbox and patterns to be able to move our teams forward. Dennis highlighted that applications enable change, and that we really need to rethink this critical relationship, this critical partnership with applications in order to be able to go on a DevOps journey together. Tom highlighted that boundaries are shifting with IoT and the edge, with the proliferation of devices. We really need to rethink our design of infrastructure. And finally, we had a conversation about the fact that people are the cornerstone, that you will need to bring new models for infrastructure and operations talent with new skills, career paths, and competencies. So my keynote colleagues and I have a couple of asks of you. The first is, as you leave this ballroom, please at those doors leave behind all of your can'ts, won'ts, shouldn'ts, and don'ts. Leave behind the mindset that we've always done it this way before, because that is not what innovation is about. Allow yourself to really enjoy the next couple of days with a beginner's mind, to be able to take in and to be able to do the thing that Dennis said that he used to do when he attended the conference as a practitioner. Set some goals for yourself to learn new things, to meet new people, and to get information so you can go back to your teams and do something different, to inspire them. Because there really has never been a more exciting time to be in infrastructure and operations. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back to the stage your conference co-chair, Distinguished Vice President David Cappuccio, along with conference co-chair and Vice President Robert Nagley.
Well, there you have it. What a fantastic backdrop to start this conference. As the chairs, our job is to do two things. We want to first welcome you, and second, thank you. Thank you for joining us, participating in this event, and helping us to work through and think through these opportunities that were presented every day to each one of us.
The theme for this event this year, the fundamental theme we used to build the agendas was enabling the digital future, speed, agility, and resilience. It's things that you folks are dealing with every day of the week. Business is driving us more and more to change, do things quickly, do things faster, do things more efficiently.
Our second part of that is to challenge you, and you've heard that challenge as Kris wrapped up the keynote. We want to challenge you to use this opportunity to its maximum potential. Look around. This is a really very impressive group of people. You should take the opportunity to connect with the folks around you, to introduce yourself, to exchange business cards, and to leverage the opportunity you have to share thoughts with the people in this room.
2,800 people, actually, the latest count, 3,150 people in this room. It's incredible.
Yeah, there's 1,402 unique companies represented here.
15 vertical markets.
And 37 countries.
And 20% of you are mid-sized enterprises. So the diversity of talent, the diversity of information, the diversity of conversations you can have across this room are pretty staggering.
Yeah. Absolutely an infinite and really powerful opportunity to network, to connect, to find opportunities to share data and share information.
There are many opportunities at the event to do different types of networking, everything from the networking lounge to networking breakfast to meetups. You can choose what you want. Most of these are driven by the app we have. So we encourage you to get on that app, find ways to interact with not just your own teams, but people you don't know, people who are doing like things with similar problems.
Yeah, absolutely, and as you've noticed from the keynotes, there is a increased focus on things like operations, cloud, infrastructure, delivery strategies. To that end, there are 10 unique tracks.
39 sessions specifically around cloud and cloud delivery strategies.
There's DevOps content.
There's infrastructure futures discussions.
And there's leadership topics that you should take advantage to understand how you're going to lead your teams and your organizations through these changes.
And for those tactical folks out there, there's a lot on delivery strategies.
So hopefully you'll find a rich set of data. The other thing you should identify, and we really encourage you to take advantage of these opportunities, is to listen to some of the thought-provoking guest speakers, the folks who are actually here from outside of Gartner to help share with you their thoughts about what's changing the market, how to change leadership, even how to address the change and the anxiety and the issues that may come up in change.
On the show floor itself, we've got 110 sponsors, like 32 of them are brand new. All of them are worth having a conversation with because they're all trying to provide solutions for you guys to help you drive and improve your infrastructures.
Yeah, the show floor really represents an unprecedented opportunity to talk to a lot of different vendors who are all trying to target opportunities and tell you how they can help you solve this problem. So take advantage of that time. And the other thing we'd like to encourage you to do is to think about how you're going to interact with your peers and take advantage of this interactive polling opportunity.
Interactive polling, we have on about 60 sessions throughout the week. In fact, we'd like you to test out interactive polling today, right now in this session. Pull out your cell phones.
Turn on your lights and then, no, okay.
It's truly anonymous, but we actually use it for research. There is a URL you can use right here, yep. Gartner.com was it ggpolls, gpolls.one.
If you haven't downloaded the app, if you've got the app, check into, we're going to actually teach you how to do this right now. We're going to do it live polling. Go into the app, into the welcome reception, and click, per the bottom, the tap here for polling. If you don't have it, just enter the URL into your browser on your phone.
Oh, so the millennials tap on the app, and the rest of us go to the URL. Okay.
Ooh.
However, let's try out a poll, just to test it out. What's the primary reason you chose to attend this conference?
I know why I'm here. All right. So this is the kind of experience, hopefully, that you'll have in each of these sessions where we're using polling, is to see what your peer group is thinking and what they're doing. Obviously, this is pretty interesting. We're going to keep running this data, so please keep filling out these questions. But let's kick to the second poll.
Second poll is we actually have a question for the audience as a whole. We've been hearing about this term repatriation for the last year or so. It's where clients have gone to the cloud for some applications and then moved that application back on premises for some reason. And the question becomes, how many people are actually doing this and at what level?
Yeah.
So the polling question is, what percentage of workloads are your organizations repatriating from the cloud?
So David presented this in the orientation meeting yesterday, and we've got an over-under. It is Vegas on the score here. So please help us out. It's either him buying dinner or me. All right, look at that.
You owe me.
I always owe you. Lastly, let me again encourage you to do this. Within the app, this is kind of your treasure trove of information. Within the app itself is all of the content you're going to see presented at this conference. So take an opportunity to get the app. You can download the slide presentations. You can follow along. It's an opportunity for you to continue the knowledge exchange, to continue learning well after the conference is done.
So our challenge to you, plan your agendas. Get on that app. You can plan your agenda for the week. In fact, you can select all the sessions you want to see, and it'll actually populate those to your calendar automatically.
Right? The second one then is to share your feedback on the app. We take your feedback very seriously. We're going to ask you for feedback on presenters, on content. Please let us know how you felt. We're always striving to improve that.
Connect with your peers. Like Dennis, I used to come to this as a practitioner, and I found the real value I got with the hallway conversations with people like me doing similar roles who I didn't know, and I got to hear a whole different perspective on how they were trying to solve my problems.
Next is to participate in the polling. We've shown you how to do it. Hopefully you see the value in it. All of that information will be available to you once the show is complete and we have that data tallied.
Walk the show floor. Get new ideas from these vendors if you can. Again, interact with those vendors as much as possible. Get as much information as you can.
Yeah.
And lastly, have fun.
Own your experience. Make this a fun experience for you. Take advantage of the opportunity to meet peers, to connect, to make associations that are really unique to this environment.
You can't have fun in Vegas and not get in trouble. So enjoy yourselves.
And most of all, have fun. Thank you very much. And enjoy the conference.